Hello again, you sick, twisted weather freaks. Welcome to another fun filled, action packed, and as always, intellectually stimulating edition of This Week in Weather. I'm your host and meteorologist DT from Weather Risk here in Central Virginia, talking about This Week in Weather as of March 7th, 2023. I am your captain of chaos, your colonel of confusion, and your commander of catastrophe. And don't you forget it, okay? Just remember, okay? Here we're going to be talking about two winter weather events coming up the next 5 days, March 11th to 12th, March 13th to 14th, and maybe something really big around March 20th. So we'll get to that. All right. So we start out here by taking a look at what we recently went through. So we'll call this background, just as a background slide here. This was the pattern we all saw it back in December, January, February. We know what January is like. On the image on the left-hand side, you can see the strong trough on the west coast, the big ridge in the eastern Pacific, Gulf of Alaska, and the big ridge on the east coast. And then the image on the right is early to mid-February, the same sort of pattern. So we are in a major pattern change. There's no doubt about that. This new pattern will bring increased snowfall, or at least winter storm chances, we'll call it chances, and below normal temperatures to really the central and the eastern U.S. for the rest of March. There's no doubt about that, from what I can see. Now, the previous jet stream pattern for the last 110, 120 days is the images we saw below. I could have posted December here, but I figured, it was the same idea. Except for the big blast of cold air the last week of December, December was also quite mild. These patterns, where you have the persistent trough on the west coast and a big ridge in the Gulf of Alaska, is known as a negative P&A, the negative phase of the Pacific North America pattern or teleconnection. And when you get a big trough like that, you get a big ridge in the southeastern states. And what that does is that keeps all the cold air up by the Great Lakes in New England. And in this kind of weather pattern, you can't get a nor'easter on the East Coast. Indeed, right now, if you go from November 1st all the way through now, we've had two nor'easters. I guess you could call them that, coastal storms. That's it, which is really few for this, as of March 7th. Now we have a couple more coming up. That's going to change, but that's to show you the power of the southeast ridge. It's really been shutting down any coastal nor'easters. And this is very common with La Ninas. La Ninas cause the Pacific jet to get very enhanced, and that favors the trough. And also, when you get all these storms on the west coast, like this on the eastern Pacific, what happens is it causes upwelling. So if you look at the sea surface temperature map, you see a lot of cold water running from Alaska down to Baja California. Now what that does is that's anchoring the trough on the west coast. Okay, so while we talk about this pattern change, we have to remember that the trough on the west coast is weakened, but it's not gone. Now that has led some people to say the cold's not coming. Now last week when I did the weather video, we showed you the maps which had a big ridge on the west coast. And I said I was skeptical about that, and that turned out to be correct. Again, the cold water running from Alaska down to Baja is favoring a trough on the west coast and keeping that trough going. It's not a La Nina trough, and it's not as big as it was, but it is a problem. And that is restricting the amount of cold air coming into the central and eastern U.S. It's still cold, it's just not as cold. Okay. Now, to show you why we kept getting this pattern here, I showed this last week. This is the last 90 days. Look at the top of this image, November 18th and February 15th. You can see that phase 8 and phase 1 are the phases for East Coast winter storms and cold weather. And if you look at the plots here, you can see that every time the MJO went into phase 8 and phase 1, it did not. It actually turned into the neutral circle. So you can see that the MJO was in phase 3 in the last 90 days, phase 4, phase 5, phase 6, phase 7, some of these several times, but not phase 8 and phase 1. In fact, we had two different opportunities in December, January for it to go into phase 8 or 1, and it didn't. And the reason why that's important is because this is phase 8. Now, this is for March, neutral conditions, but we have almost the same pattern. If you look at La Nina, December, January, phase 8, you still have a big trough on the East Coast. Not as big, but it's still there. This is the current pattern right now for phase 8 in March. That's why I'm so bullish about the pattern, relatively speaking. Now, is it going to be like, January 1996 or 2016? No. But this is the best pattern we've seen in 4 months. If you like, below normal temperatures and winter storm chances. We'll see which ones catch, which ones don't. But this is phase 8, which keeps a big trough on the east coast, and a big blocking ridge in Greenland, northern Canada, and a moderate ridge over the Rockies. This is the snowstorm signal. That's what phase 8 is. Phase 8 in neutral, whether it's December, January, February, March, is the snowstorm signal. That's what that's showing. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to get one. It just means the pattern is favorable. Okay? All right. To show you how this MJO thing works, how do we know this pattern really is coming change? How do we know that? Well, this is the MJO graph here. And for those of you who aren't familiar, there's the neutral circle in the middle of it. So when the MJO, the plots are in the middle, it means the MJO is sleeping and it's not having any impact. All right? But when it gets close to the edge, you see where I have the word strong written on the diagram? Whether it's at the edge of phase 6 or phase 7 or phase 2 or 3, the edge, the further the lines are out towards the edge of the diagram, the stronger the MJO is. So there we are on March 6th at phase 7, about to go into phase 8. So we know it's going into phase 8. And look what happens here. This is the next 2 weeks. This is off the charts. The GFS extended, bias corrected, the European again taken out for the bias. They bring the MJO into phase 8 at the edge of the graph. Almost record strong intensity for phase 8 during the middle of March, from let's say from March 7th all the way through March 14th or 15th, something like that. So, and then it goes into phase 1. So that's how we know the pattern is changing. We did not see this. Look at this image. Look at this image here. We did not see this at all from November 18th to February 28th. Not a single time. That's how we know it's changing. So that's it. I mean, if you're still going to make the argument that it's not going to change the pattern with this sort of shift on the MJO, you either don't know what you're talking about, or you're drunk, or you're insane. That's the only possible explanation. Okay. Now, what happens when it gets into phase 1 in the second half of March? What does that do? Okay, here's a new slide for you. Here's our MJO phase and the jet stream pattern. This is phase 1. Notice we still have a large blocking pattern in Greenland and northern Canada, and we have a broad trough covering the west coast, the plains, the deep south, and the northeast. This is a very active weather pattern with a lot of systems coming in on the southern jet stream, and you have cold air northern jet stream coming down from Greenland and eastern Canada. So this remains a very stormy pattern, and it implies that low pressure areas are going to take a more southerly track from California, let's say, to Texas, to Oklahoma, to Arkansas, to North Carolina, as opposed to going, let's say, from Colorado to Kansas to Ohio to Pennsylvania. So this is a more southerly track because the trough is broader and covers more of the country. So that's what this implies. Okay. Now let's look at our teleconnections. Again, we've showed this before. The 4 different teleconnections in North America. There are 2 on the Atlantic side, which is the Arctic Oscillation, whether it's weak or strong, the polar vortex. There's the NAO, which is the Greenland block, which can be either the Greenland block, or when the NAO is positive, it can be a Greenland low. And there's 2 teleconnections on the Pacific side, which help determine the daily weather patterns. There's the P&A, which is the ridge on the west coast. That can be a ridge or a trough. And as we saw, for most of the winter so far, we've had a negative P&A, a trough on the west coast. Then, of course, in Alaska, we can have the EPO, which is the Eastern Pacific Oscillation. This is known as the Alaskan Ridge. And when it is negative, you get really cold air from Siberia coming into Canada. And when it's positive, you get mild air coming into Canada, which shuts off the Arctic supply. So let's take a look. Here's the Atlantic side. Okay, we're looking at the AO and the NAO. So what are they showing? Well, here we can see the black lines. Oh, let me bring this forward here. You can see that's where we are. Okay, we're now negative, March 7th. Now, most of the models bring it up towards neutral right through March 24, 25. This is the Arctic Oscillation. The NAO, which is the Greenland block, here we are negative, brings it up to neutral, and then drops to negative again and close to neutral for the middle end of the month. So that's not too bad. If we look at the Pacific side, let me bring this forward again. You can see again here's the P&A, the west coast, ridge or trough. It's close to neutral. See that? Now it goes negative a little bit because we get a bit of a trough here. Actually, these did not update, so let me get rid of these slides. Okay, I'll have to update them. Anyway, so, all right, we'll just skip that slide and keep with the Pacific side. I happen to know that the P&A and the EPO are both going to be close to neutral for the next 2 weeks. That was the point I'm trying to get across here. All right, let's look at our actual maps here and see what's going on with this. So let me bring this forward here. All right. So this is the pattern now as of tomorrow, March 8th. So we can see that there's a huge block right here. See this enormous block? There's a Greenland block. It's moved into Labrador, Canada. There's an ocean low in southeast Canada, and here's our trough. Now notice the flow here is split. This is a ridge, and down here is a trough. So it's not a full long wave trough like we had back in January and February and December. It's a split pattern here. Now this energy is going to get ejected eastward. So the question is, and notice we still have kind of a ridge here in the southeastern states. See that? Now this again has a lot of weather hobbyists and weenies worried that the ridge is coming back. It's not. Okay, and people who are making that assertion simply don't know what they're talking about. So let's go on to the next slide. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so here we have the piece of energy gets ejected and it begins to track. Look what it does. See how it's knocking down the southeast ridge. It's going over the ridge and then it's dropping south of Chicago. See this piece of energy here? This is the March 10th. This is going to become the Friday-Saturday storm, this piece of energy here. There's the block. There's the Alaskan block here. And there's our Pacific trough. But again, this is just a trough here. It's not a long wave trough that was going from Alaska to California. It's just a little one right here in British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest. So this feature is forced to track underneath the block. This is what the blocking does. It can't go up in Chicago, can't go to Montreal, it has to go underneath it. And you can see what I'm talking about here in just a second. It goes underneath it and it does this. You can see, here you go, the big rapidly intensifies into a closed upper low on Saturday morning. Then the next piece of energy is coming in here. And this too is going to force the drop southward. You see how close these features are? This is important because the proximity of these two features is going to affect this one for Monday. But there's the block here, the southern edge of the block, and it's forced to go underneath it. And it amplifies and closes off and it becomes a significant storm. So this is what the maps look like. This is Friday morning at 10 a.m. Now you have some snow in the Shenandoah Valley, the eastern panhandle of West Virginia, western and central Maryland, northern Ohio, Michigan, western Pennsylvania. And then by Saturday 7 a.m., the lows move off the coast. Interestingly, it does not bring a lot of snow to eastern New England. The models are driving it off the coast. Now, why are they driving it off the coast? Because of this feature we just talked about. This feature is kicking this thing fast off the coast. If this wasn't here, this would bomb out and stall and hammer New England. But this one is kicking. This was known as an upstream kicker, and it's going to kick this system out to sea. That's why it doesn't do that. And you can see that also here. Now, it rapidly intensifies. This is the 18Z European ensemble. And here it's pretty strong. Okay, 994. And here it's about the same. But I think if you look at the difference, it's about the same. But this is a fairly well organized system. I think it's going to have more snow in southern New England than what the maps are showing. So I would not be surprised if this is right, the more snow in New York City, New Jersey, Connecticut, that sort of thing, maybe eastern and Massachusetts away from the coast. And again, this is a decent snow event, I think, for Pennsylvania, for Philly, maybe for New York City, depending on the timing. Now, this is coming in Friday night, Saturday morning. This is 7 a.m. Okay, this is 7 a.m. So this is going to be snow because it's coming at night. March snowstorms that come at night is where you get your March snow accumulations. When they come during the daytime, unless it's a blizzard, you don't get a lot of accumulation in March. So this is coming at night, so that's a good sign. So if you look at the total snowfall, we can see a few inches. You see that in Ohio, northern Indiana, southern Michigan, and then 3 to 6 inches, a lot of Pennsylvania, except for Philly and Pittsburgh. Eastern West Virginia, a few inches there, maybe an inch or two in the northern Shenandoah Valley, western Maryland, central Maryland, wouldn't surprise me. And then you can see the snow gets very close to New York City. Now this is the 12, this is based upon the 12Z operational European, but if this is right, there may be a little more snow in New York City, into New Jersey and Connecticut and Rhode Island than what the model is showing. So it's possible we may be looking at an increase here. All right, now what happens after this? Remember we talked about this next system? Well, look what happens. Okay, because this is the March, this is the Saturday storm. This is now Monday morning. See this? Okay, this is now moving over here, but these are still too close. And there's another one here. So you have 1, 2, 3. Short wave, short wave, short wave. This system forces this one to slow down. And what it does is it amplifies. You see how it is expanding rapidly? It went from this to this in like 36 to 48 hours. This is a major amplification here in the short wave. And that represents a rapidly intensifying low pressure area. And then when it reaches the coast on Tuesday, Monday night, Tuesday, it goes boom, and it really hammers New England with a major snowstorm. If this is right, then New England's going to get clocked, maybe even New York City. Let me show you what happens here. You can see the system developing nicely. Here it is on Sunday, and there's the first low. Let me see if we bring this forward here. Let's try this one. Yeah. So there is the low. This is the Saturday low. You see how close they are to each other? See that? And there is the first low, the primary, the secondary developing down here, the Gulf Coast states. There's your cold high, sending some cold air southward. And this low is going to take over as it moves off the coast and explode off the New England coast. There it is on Monday. Now, if this high was a little closer to us in central and eastern Virginia and New Jersey and the Delmarva, Washington, Baltimore, and Philly, this would be a snowstorm. But it's a little too far away and it's not quite strong enough. It's only around 1034 millibars. If this was 1050 millibars, different ball game. All right, this is a great track for a mid-Atlantic snowstorm, but the low-level temperatures are just too warm. So it's going to start off a snow on Sunday night in a lot of western half of Virginia and West Virginia, western central Maryland, and maybe even DC and Baltimore and Philly, but it may not stay that way because the temperatures jump up. All right? And because these highs are just not close enough. Now, maybe it'll change. It's possible it could change. If this low tracks, let's say, further to the south and east, that's more cold air, things might be different. But that's the way it looks right now. Now, you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, this is Sunday night, 7 a.m. Notice we have some snow in the Shenandoah Valley. And then the bottom is, on the right-hand side, rather, is Monday at 7 a.m. Notice that in Philly it's raining, New York City's mixed, Baltimore's rain, DC's rain, Charlottesville's rain, Richmond's rain. But in the valley and eastern half of West Virginia and western Maryland and much of Pennsylvania except for Philly, it's snow. And pretty good snow at that. In terms of snow amounts, well, there's two different ones to look at. For the snowfall ending as of Monday, as of on the evening of the 13th at 7 p.m., you can see a few inches. The light snow in the Shenandoah Valley, an inch into two, maybe eastern portions of the West Virginia Panhandle, western Maryland. And the bottom image shows what happens when the storm bombs out on Monday night, Tuesday, off the coast of New England. And you can see that's 14, 15 inches in Worcester and 10, a widespread 8 to 15 inch snowfall in New England is what this is showing really on Monday into Tuesday. So this would be the best. This would be if this is right. And this is the 12Z, you can see for New England. Now notice Boston here gets very close to going over, but once the low moves off the coast, it wraps around. See? And even some snow getting back into New York City. This is the biggest winter storm of the season so far for New England, if this is right. This storm on Monday night and Tuesday. Especially since it bombs out. Here's the European ensemble. Look at this. Holy mackerel. This is a gargantuan hit for New England, if this is right. I mean, wow. This is underdone, if this is right. If the European ensemble's right, this snow amount is underdone for New England. I got to tell you, this is a big deal. This is a big freaking deal. No doubt. Okay, now what happens after this? All right. We got a bit of a break, and then this is March 16th, 17th. So let's talk about this. Here is the March 13th, 14th low. It's in Nova Scotia, Canada. This is 50-50 low. 50 degrees north latitude, 50 degrees west longitude, right there, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, okay? So there's our block in Greenland. There's a ridge here, which is actually part of the block, and there's the energy coming in. And we have a massive piece of energy coming out of Utah and Colorado. See the black line there? That's a short wave. Now, for most of the season so far, this system is tracked towards Chicago or Michigan. Again, here, because of the flow, look at the lines coming down here from the ridge in the northwest to southeast direction. See how it's coming down towards Pennsylvania, New York State? This system cannot go to the Great Lakes. It has to pass underneath it because of this system and the blocking feature. That's why these features are so important for East Coast winter storms. Okay. Then what happens, this is now day 10. Again, this is speculation. I know that, but let me just show you what I'm looking at. This system goes negative when it reaches the Mississippi Valley, the Delta region. We have a monster block here, a huge 50-50 low, and look at the split in the jet stream. I love split flow patterns in the wintertime with the MJO in phase 8 and a huge block. This is just screaming snowstorm for the mid-Atlantic, if this is right. It's 10 days from now. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying if it's right. I don't know if it's right. But this pattern, if the map looks like this on March 17th or 18th, I'm going to be going bonkers. This is a big ass snowstorm coming. And what happens is, this is what the map looks like. Enormous Arctic high, okay, in James Bay, Canada. There's the low way down there in southern Mississippi. And look at the cold wind still being affecting the cold air southward. You see how it's coming south? So this is into as soon as this comes north, you're going to get a snowstorm out of it. If this is right, it may not be right. It's probably not right, but if it is, it's going to be something. And of course, the other thing is, look at the date. It's only a day or two before spring. Wouldn't that make perfect sense? That the winter, where most of the East Coast hasn't seen any significant snow, you actually get a snowstorm on the day before or the day of spring. Wouldn't that make just perfect sense? I'm telling you, it really would. Anyway, we'll see what happens. I'm confident about the first two events, March 11th or 12th. I'm not confident about the one on the 18th or 19th. We'll see. This is meteorologist DT from Weather Risk. I'll see you over on the Twitter page, the website, and over on the Facebook page.